videotape here now, and we're going to roll the videotape. And what I have is a bunch of streeters and people that we've talked to at the different meetings, and they're going to explain different and innovative ways, perhaps, where the head tax and Chinese Exclusion Act might be redressed. Can we go to the videotape, please?
Well, I think the younger generations should be bring up this old generation what they done for the countries, and also the head tax should be the government's give it give it back to the old generation who pay for the taxes.
I want it. Anybody want it? Go vote. I want it too. See? Anybody, he got to pay everybody. Japanese, anybody, he pay for. How about me finding another action? Must be paid.
But that's all?
So what we recommend that time was that there should be, the redress should be symbolic in terms of monetary reward. There should be a recognition of other ethno-cultural injustices. And thirdly, more importantly, it should be directed towards the prevention of future wrongs upon all ethno-cultural groups, rather than either the Japanese or Chinese, rather than to crack past injustices.
It's very important, I believe, as in the Chinese community, that the diversity of the Chinese community unify around this issue. But I think it's going to be very important that every segment of the Chinese community, particularly in Vancouver and nationally, be educated on the issue and support the issue.
The time is so short that if we don't take action now, redress will lose a lot of its meaning. Because redress, in large part, is indeed for those who have been discriminated against.
This is an issue of justice, not just for head taxpayers or their families, not just for the Chinese Canadian community, but for all Canadians. And I call upon your active support to achieve a fair and meaningful resolution to this urgent matter. Although our head taxpayers are very elderly, and some have passed away, the issue will not die.
We remain adamant that we are in full support of the Chinese Canadian National Council's position as reached March 16th in Toronto, that there must be an apology from the government for the impact of the head tax and Chinese Exclusion Act legislation, and that compensation be in the ballpark of $23 million to include individual and community compensation, and that individual compensation is a priority.
Well, gentlemen, as you can see, we're back, and there is no shortage of opinion. One thing that we haven't done is I'd like to go down the line and just ask each of you individually, since Army, Navy, Air Force veterans has reached a consensus position, but as I understand, there is deviations and the membership is agreed with that position. But however, I just wonder from the heart how you all feel, because you're all sons of head taxpayers. You've all been born in Canada. You've all served your country. I'd like to start with Mr. Wong. Gim, could you tell us, how do you feel that this situation could best be addressed?
Well, the minimum position of the Army Navy Veterans organization is that a formal apology thoroughly outlining the contributions that Chinese did to for the railroad and the discrimination and the hardships they were, that were imposed on them with the head tax and the Exclusion Act. And we're not doing it, as you say, for ourselves. We're obviously doing it because mother and fathers all went through all this terrible hardship in those days. But there's a little point that I don't want to see repeated in the history books in Canada, is that the last spike was driven by all white people. a goateed gentleman who was the general manager or whoever of the CPR was driving the last bike. I want to see some Chinese standing behind the majority of the workers who were there. And all succeeding generations should acknowledge the history that is never actually told to even my sons and daughters, or I'm sure most immigrants will not learn of it, or succeeding generations of any nationality in Canada.
Yeah. Do you think individual compensation is a very large part of this redress, or do you think it's not really
Well,
that
that's
necessary?
academic. No, it's academic because I understand in '86 there were 2,600 registered persons, and as of today there are maybe 800 surviving.
Yeah, I understand
So
600.
It's by the time this is settled, it's not going to the right people, and they won't enjoy it. So it'll have to be a foundation fund and a formal apology from the government. Those are two minimum.
That would be the minimum, a foundation fund, an apology from the government.
And succeeding history should also acknowledge the contribution of our forebears, their contributions to this country.
Okay, moving right along, I'd like to give Mr. Ma a chance to go at this. Yourself personally, how do you feel this issue would be redressed to your satisfaction, not necessarily the Army and Navy vets' position, right?
Well, personally, I'm in favor of what Gim and Harry has said. That is, we should get a formal apology from Ottawa, from the federal government. Number two, we should ask the government for $1 million for the establishment of a foundation. And from that, annually, from the interest accrued from the $1 million endowment fund, we can use that money to fund a professorship, a scholarship, and educational programs, plus all the nonprofit projects in the community. That could be split throughout the different Chinese communities across Canada. I think that's the most reasonable settlement and the minimum demand. That would be my thought.
Yeah. Mr. Khan, Harry, I was just wondering, how do you feel for yourself personally? How would you like to see this addressed?
I like to go back to how this redress, getting money back, start. I heard when this started a few years back is from Vancouver East MP Margaret Mitchell, who helped to start that. He said the Canadian immigration law is not correct, not fair toward our Chinese by put on the head tax, and also this 1923 immigration law that not keep all the Chinese out. And they said, no, if you still got that certificate, then you will try to get your money back. So that's the reason how that started. If you come and tell me, you give me your father's certificate, I will give you, I try to get the government to give you $50,000 or so, if I can. Naturally, everybody do that. But the fact is, I don't think the government will do it. If that's the reason why I've been delayed for so long. Now, my own way, how I feel about this whole thing is I already expressed to you, as what Roy and Gim said the same thing. We want the government to make a public statement, make a public announcement, to put in record about what our pioneer done for this country, the contribution. We put it in history, and we want the government to protect it under the law in future. Make sure in future, not any ethnic group, not only Chinese, any ethnic, any Canadian citizen should be living equally. No discrimination, no discrimination. No? So so that we could live together under one roof.
Right. Well, it's obvious that this issue is probably going to make the rounds, and there's going to be a lot of talking about it. But the one thing that all of you sort of mentioned, and which I find kind of interesting, and it was something that Doug Cheung made way back, and he is a veteran also. And we have an excerpt actually from a speech that he gave at the 40th anniversary reunion of the Army, Navy, Air Force Vets Unit 280 back in 1987. And I'd like to run a bit of it for you and for our audience. Could we roll the tape, please?
Douglas Cheung, Member of Parliament for Vancouver East from 1957 to 1962, was appointed a member of the Order of Canada Christmas Eve 1990. He gave this speech at the 40th reunion of the Army, Navy, and Air Force Veterans Pacific Unit 280. We bring you some excerpts from his speech.
7 years ago, in Victoria, I had the honor of welcoming those of you who attended the reunion of Chinese Canadian veterans who served Canada during the Second World War. Tonight, in Vancouver, we celebrate the 40th anniversary of our veterans reunion. Our numbers are fewer now than they were 7 years ago. But then, our numbers were few 40 years ago. And our contribution, because we were so few in numbers, was, insofar as our military contribution was concerned, insignificant, and it has merited only a footnote in our Canadian social history. But I take pride in the knowledge that, like you, we belong to a very exclusive and special club. We paid no admission fee to join this club. And in fact, for most of us, we even had to fight to be allowed into the armed forces. And from a military point of view, because there were only approximately 400 of us throughout all of Canada, there were not enough of us to even form our own battalion. But while our contribution to the Canadian military effort might have been insignificant, our contribution to the social and economic progress of our Chinese community was a far greater victory than any battle. The political impact of our efforts of our small group was entirely out of proportion to our actual numbers, because after the war, for the first time, we were able to demand and to receive equality of treatment as Canadian citizens. Unfortunately, after some 40 years, there are many amongst us, particularly among the younger generation and the new arrivals in Canada, who are not aware that if it had not been for our efforts in demanding recognition of our status as Canadian citizens, the Chinese community would not be as dynamic, as affluent, and as well educated as it is today. There are some who even now take it for granted that we have always had the right to practice in any of the professions, to receive world recognition for our participation in the arts, sports, business, and the academic field. These people know nothing about the early restrictions as to where we could live, and they know even less about the fact that we were denied the right to vote and to be recognized as a political force. And so they do not and cannot understand the discrimination which the Chinese community once suffered.
Doug Cheung with the keynote speech at the 40th reunion of the Army, Navy, Air Force Veterans Unit 280. This speech was made on November the 6th, 1987. I must admit that when I first heard that speech and the things that Mr. Cheung talked about, I was completely, blown away by the passion and his oratory. And it's something that I hadn't really thought about very much, about these Gold Mountain adventurers and pioneers, the head taxpayers, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and how so very little is really done